Good morning, my dear friends. I hope you're all doing real well. Today we're going to be learning chapter 7, the laws of brachot and the laws of blessings, and we're going to be learning all about the various customs that there are of mannered behavior during a meal. So the Rambam says that there are many different customs of behavior, the correct way of behaving during a meal, and they are all here in order that we should have a proper way of the way we eat. So first of all, he says that when we come into dinner, we come to eat a meal, so the person of the greatest stature, the teacher, the rabbi, whoever, should be the one that should first wash their hands. And then everyone else comes and sits down and sits. And the one of this person of great stature should sit at the head of the table. And then, you have his closest students near him and so on and so forth. Or the owner of the house, and you have the family and the guests and so on. So in other words, person who is of greatest esteem should be at the head, and then you have everyone else. And then the host should recite the blessing of hamotzi, the blessing of over the bread. We make a special blessing. And then everyone will answer amen. And then he gives out the bread to everyone. And when the person is making the blessing on the bread and is going to be, it's called the breaking of the bread. He takes a full loaf, as we're going to be learning in a second. So he should wait to do this until there is salt, to be able to dunk the bread in the salt before it is eaten. Because there is a custom that we dip our bread in salt before we eat it. It actually goes back to the custom in the temple. When they were bringing sacrifices, they would put salt on all sacrifices. So our bread is compared to the sacrifice and we put salt on it. And unless they were planning on eating specifically bread which is not salted, so then they don't have to do it. But in a general case, if you eat bread, we dip it into a little bit of salt. And when he cuts off pieces and to give it out to the crowd, which as is the custom, so then he should not make tiny little pieces, so it shouldn't look like he's very stingy, or he shouldn't make very large pieces, so it shouldn't look as, the person is a very, really wants to eat a lot, but rather it should be a normal sized piece, except for on Shabbat. Shabbat, it's a mitzvah to eat at the Shabbos dinner, so therefore you should make nice, big sized pieces. And also he should start cutting it from the nicest part of the loaf. So where it has been baked, very thoroughly and well, so over there, that's the place where we should start cutting the bread. And the Rambam says that it's the most preferable way of performing the mitzvah is to have a complete whole loaf when we make the blessing on the bread, when we sit down to dinner. That's why on Shabbat, we eat a challah, which is a full loaf. And so much so, and it's quite important to have a full loaf. So even if you have two types of bread, one which is made out of wheat, one bread which is made out of barley. So the wheat bread has a higher stature, and wheat has a higher level of bread versus barley, which is more secondary. So if you have a barley bread, which is a full loaf, and the wheat bread is only a half a loaf, so then you should actually take them both together to make the blessing on it, so that you should have the element of the wheat, which is special, and you should have the element of the complete bread, which is also important. And on Shabbat and holidays, we should have 2 loaves of bread. And so that's why we have 2 challahs on Shabbos. Now, when a person is going to be cutting up the challah, gives it out to everyone, the person should not, the Rambam says an interesting law, that you should not give the piece of bread to the person in their hand, but rather you should put it down on the table, or so on and so forth. And only a person who is a mourner should accept the bread in their own hand. So that's an interesting thing. There's actually an interesting custom, which the Rambam doesn't write over here, it's just an interesting custom that I'll mention to you, is that there is a Sephardic custom that they throw the bread to to the different people. But over here, the Rambam says you should just put it. You should put it down. You shouldn't pass it in their hand. And everyone who is sitting around the table should wait to eat until the one who has made the blessing, the host, has eaten from the bread, and only then should they start eating. And similarly, also the host who is making the blessing and is eating the bread should wait until everyone has answered Amen, and only then should he eat from the bread. Now, if you have a few people who are eating together from a certain dish, so then in such a case, they should wait for each other to join together in the meal. And because there's the concept of eating together as they make the blessing together at the end, so there's an idea of beginning the meal together as well. And here comes an interesting law which the Rambam mentions, which is brought down in the Talmud, that a person should not speak while they eat, because it is dangerous. If a person has food in their mouth and they speak, they can, God forbid, choke. So therefore, you should not eat. You should not speak while you eat. They actually taught me this as I was a kid. My mom told me, don't eat with food in your mouth. But yeah, it's a law. Rambam brings it down. And therefore, for that reason, we actually already learned that if people are being served wine in the middle of dinner, they should each one make a blessing on their own, not everyone together answering Amen, because maybe someone will have some food in their mouth and it can be dangerous. And then the Rambam says that a person should not look at another person's plate while they eat, because we don't want to embarrass them of what is on their plate, what they decided to eat, how much they're taking, what type, so on and so forth. We don't look at other people's plates. If we have an attendant, like a waiter, who is coming and helping and giving out the food and so on, so although the person is not eating with them, but it's a merciful thing to give them a little bit of food. From every type of food that he's serving, you should give him some. And therefore, it comes out an interesting thing that if you're giving the person, this waiter, some wine to drink, so then he'll make a blessing on the wine to drink it. But then, if someone else gives him some wine on the next table, he has to make a blessing again. And if he gets a wine again, he has to make a blessing again, because every time he's getting wine, he doesn't know if he's going to be getting any more. So in his mind, if this waiter is drinking this wine, he's only getting this. Now, if someone else decides to give him some more wine, then he's going to have to make a new blessing because he didn't have it in mind in the beginning. So it plays itself quite interestingly. And when a person goes to the bathroom in the middle of eating, they should obviously wash their hands, especially if they have stopped and spoken to someone outside, or prolonged their wait to come back to the dinner. Then they should wash their both hands again and come back and join in the dinner. Now the Rambam says the law over here, where he discusses the concept of not wasting food. Rambam says that we should not waste food, and we should not make food. We shouldn't throw out food or ruin food for no good reason. The Rambam says, therefore, raw meat should not be placed on bread, because raw meat is not to be eaten in such a way, and bread should not be used in a way just to store this raw meat. It's going to ruin the bread. It's going to make it disgusting. Similarly, also, you shouldn't pour a full cup over. You shouldn't pour full cup over bread. You shouldn't use bread as a support for your plate. Or hi, hi, Musia. You want to say hi? Hi. Yeah, come. Basta gehen rice and gehen And so we should not use bread as a support for a plate, because it is not proper for the bread to have it like that. Similarly, also, we should not use different fruits or berries and so on for that, because again, it's not they become deformed, and it's grapes or berries or figs, other fruits like that. And we should not wash our hands with wine, any type of wine. It's not proper. This wine is something which is of importance. You shouldn't just use it to wash your hands. If there are guests eating at a host house, so you're joining in for dinner, so you're sitting there, you got a plate of food. Now, the child of the host, in comes little Musya. The child of the host comes in, where dinner is being served. So the Rambam says you should not serve the child any of the food. In other words, you shouldn't on your own accord say, "Oh, here, you want some of this?" and to give that to the child. Because it could be that this host doesn't have enough food, and he only has this amount which they have served you here. And if you're going to be giving it out to the child, they're going to go and eat it, and now there's not going to be enough on the table, and maybe they'll come to be embarrassed. So therefore, we should be very careful and sensitive to the host, and to, as they serve you, you should eat what you're being served and not start giving other people. So, once we finished eating, so then we clean up the table, and we take away the leftover bread, and then we wash our hands for the after washing, where, as we mentioned yesterday, we wash our hands because maybe there is some of this salt, which was a dangerous salt back in the day, and we want to wash our hands off it, and then we start getting ready for the grace after meal. So the Rambam says that in regards to this washing at the end of the meal, so the one who makes the blessing of the grace after meal, who's going to be leading it, which is usually going to be the person of greatest stature who is there in the crowd, he starts with the washing. But then after that, it doesn't really matter who washes first, who washes afterwards, because the Rambam says that there are, for instance, in regards to washing, there is no honor to be the first one to wash or the second one to wash. And there are certain places where it doesn't make a difference who goes first. For instance, in regards to washing dirty hands, the Rambam says in regards to crossing bridges, doesn't matter who crosses the bridge first, or on the road. Similarly, the only place where there is a difference when people are walking, and there's a difference of stature, and we should give the first, the person of greatest stature that respect, is when they're going through a doorway. The person who is of the greatest stature should walk first in, which is an interesting comment which the Rambam mentions as a side note. So once they finished washing and they have now washed their hands, dried it, now they make the grace after meal. The leader will recite the blessing. Everyone will join in with him, and then after that, there was a custom. Now we don't do this, but maybe there's some communities that still do this. Which then afterwards they would bring in a certain incense burner. They would bring in like some goods, like a good smell, some sort of spice, and either it was burnt or it was just smelled by everyone, they would make a special blessing. And at that point, so then he would then lead that blessing. And if it is possible to do the grace after meal with a cup of wine, that's definitely a very positive thing. So the person would hold the wine in one hand and recite the blessing, and if they were doing the incense, then he would hold that in the left hand while they are doing the grace after meal. And then at the end of the grace after meal, the person will drink the wine, and we do not speak. Conversation should not be done during the time of the grace after meal, but rather everyone should be focused on the grace, on the blessing, until after the wine was drunken. So that is the chapter of Rambam for today. Hope you enjoyed it. We're learning all about various customs of during the meal, the various ways of mannered behavior while we eat, at a dinner, everyone together. It's coming up. You have Thanksgiving, you have other dinners, Shabbat, holidays. We should all know what is the proper manner to behave. So, all the best to you guys. We'll be in touch. We'll see you guys all tomorrow.